bit of a problem putting this all together. I had I was panicking a bit, telling Patty had to go and come back and whatever. But yeah, we are here with Pat Leonard of the New York Daily News, beat reporter for the New York Giants, another New York team we got to worry about this offseason. Big Blue. So, Pat, appreciate you coming, my man.
You got
it,
man. Thanks for having me.
No problem, brother. I heard you had a little night last night. We're going to have one tonight, though. We're going to have one tonight.
Yeah. Do it again. Back to back. Back to back.
But, Pat, maybe you want to give people a little bit of insight as to how you cover the Giants, what you kind of do on a daily, just to kind of give some foundation, and then we can dive in with some questions.
Yeah, I'm in East Rutherford every day at their facility, covering the practices in the locker room, which I think is 45 minutes a day. So that's like 3 or 4 days a week, plus the games. I really started to enjoy, like, before the games, doing the videos of the guys coming in with their fits.
Nice.
And it's also like a good way to get to know them. Some of the guys are passionate about fashion, that kind of thing. But really doing a well-rounded job of, like, getting to know them as people, not just players. So, like, starting in 2016, covered the team. They went to the playoffs that year, and then they didn't go back until Daboll's first season, right, beating Minnesota 2 years ago. And
that great Minnesota defense,
Yeah, right. Took them apart. Yeah.
Best Daniel Jones's game, by the way. That was the best game he had.
It's crazy. Like, it could be
legacy game.
Right. Yeah. And it's also like it gets him paid. And does that end up being a great thing for the Giants that he had that game? Or does it end up being a bad thing for them? Right.
Good point.
That's really the big question right now. But, also like, covering the NFL for the Daily News, kind of doing NFL columnist stuff and staying connected around the league. But it's cool covering, like being in person daily at like a landmark franchise like the Giants, because even though they are struggling right now and in a tough stretch, like I was talking to Xavier McKinney on my podcast the other day, and he said, now who knows what's going to happen? And actually his agent and the Giants are meeting today, probably as we speak right now. But he basically said, like, to him, he's loyal, and it would mean nothing would mean more than to push through the storm in New York and win with the team that drafted him, win with the Giants. And that's kind of how I feel about, as somebody covering them, is like, it's been a wild ride of bad football.
Yeah.
And some key decisions that backfired. But if it gets good, it'll taste that much better for the fan base and just walking into the building.
So listen, you brought it up with Daniel Jones. I mean, the cap hit $47 million this year. Obviously, they have an opt-out after the season. It's a big number. It's a big number for Daniel Jones.
Yeah.
So my question is he the guy? Is he a bridge guy? Are they looking at new options going forward? Where do you think the Giants stand with Daniel Jones?
It's a great question. I mean, I don't know why I hesitated at first. I think it was just hearing
I think that explains it, though.
You said it well. Putting the number on it really makes you kind of swallow and take a deep breath before you really think about it. I mean, they still believe in him as a player and a person. They're also forced to for at least one more year because of that contract. Right. Though Joe Schoen, I thought, did a good job of, if they were going to sign him, having the out after year 2. I think that was intentional from the Giants, not because they said, hey, we're going to bail, but it was,
keeps the option
we've
open.
Seen some. Yeah. We want to keep seeing more. We've seen you progress. We want to keep seeing you take the next step. I think in this draft, what they're looking to do is draft a quarterback, but ideally go the, like, Jordan Love, Aaron Rodgers route.
That late round, sit him for a year.
Yeah,
not
late
one
first,
of the, not one
second.
Of the blue chips, but something later on.
I think if they could get one of the blue chips, they would. I just don't think they're going to be able to do it.
Right.
I would say this. I came in this week, and I still am focused on the quarterbacks from a Giants and league-wide perspective. It's just, it's the story of this draft, right? But after being here for not that long, I'm surprised at how quickly kind of my vision of the Giants' plans has shifted to quarterback in any way possible at 6, maybe, because if they don't draft one now, Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll, who knows if they ever will?
Yeah.
For the Giants. But I went from there. I'm already at, they'd probably like to, but if they're not going to get one, how do you support Daniel Jones best? You pick either an offensive lineman or a wide receiver at 6, and you get a J.J. McCarthy, let's say, at the back of the first. Now, I know there's people who think J.J. is going to go way higher than some of us think, than I clearly think. But that's part of what I'm trying to dig into right now, guys.
Yeah, well, you heard what Brandon Beane said when he was on the podium recently, that he picked and he traded assets for Josh Allen because he knew it might be his last opportunity to do so.
Yeah.
So you look at the Giants situation now. I don't think Chain's necessarily in that at that point, but when you look at a report like today with Diana Rossini that 4 quarterbacks might potentially go 1, 2, 3, 4 back to back to back to back, like LeBron wanted to do in Miami. Never happened with LeBron. I got to give LeBron a dig. Come on,
Come on.
No,
any chance I can.
That was a stray. That was a good stray. Well placed.
Caught a stray.
How do you feel about
cat.
that? And if that were to happen with the Giants there at 6, do you try to get in that top 4 or top 3? I mean, how do you kind of think about this?
I think that even though I outlined that I think most likely at 6 they pick a position player, Joe Schoen is the type of general manager who will make those calls. Like,
yes.
He will talk to all the teams ahead of the Giants and find out what it would cost.
Mm-hmm.
And they are studying all of these quarterbacks as if they might take one.
Right.
That doesn't mean they will there. But to me, if they fall in love with one, they will be that aggressive. That's to me. But the top 3 to me makes no sense. It makes no sense to me why any of the teams in the top 3 would trade out. They all really badly need quarterbacks in a strong quarterback class, where next year every scout you talk to is like, yeah, I don't really feel next year's quarterback class. If you don't take one now, where are you getting one? So I think the Patriots trade out of 3 stuff is nonsense.
Interesting.
I could be wrong.
Could you see them not taking a quarterback at 3?
No, that's what I'm saying is, like, I think the idea that they wouldn't take a QB there is crazy. And I think, like Robert Kraft and Bill Belichick, it was a tug of war the last 2 years between the two over Mac Jones. The coach knowing that he wasn't the guy, the owner keeping him in there, saying like, let's make it work, forcing it. It just delayed the inevitable, obviously. But now Kraft has a chance to kind of like make his next legacy pick, the quarterback pick, to show that they can move on without Belichick. And I know, it's Mayo, it's Elliott Wolf, but it's really Robert Kraft's show. So I just find it hard to believe that they won't go quarterback there. I think the idea of 4 is interesting to me. Now, listen, it's possible that the 4th quarterback taken in that 1 through 4 still is an elite player and a great player.
Yeah.
But it would be a little interesting. Like you mentioned the Josh Allen pick. If the Giants sold a big ransom to move, let's say, 2 spots to get the 4th quarterback on the board,
which would be odd.
Yeah. So I'm just like, that doesn't mean that, like, let's say that was Drake May or JJ or whoever. That doesn't mean the kid wouldn't succeed, but that's harder for me to see.
Yeah.
Than going up to 3 if it was available, or, it's funny. If any other team than the Commanders was picking 2, then, I mean, that to me would be the play.
Yeah,
I agree.
But they're not
for the Giants,
that, obviously.
But because it's the Commanders, it's in division, and it's a team in the quarterback market, it's not happening.
Now, with the 6th pick in the draft, let's say 3 quarterbacks go. The 3 quarterbacks go with the top 3 picks, and then potentially Marvin Harrison, Malik Neighbors. So if the O-lineman, Joe Alt, is there and Rome Odunze is there, would they be going with Odunze, you think? Because I felt like initially at that 6th pick, it's kind of like no man's land there. Yep. You don't have one of the blue chip quarterbacks. You missed on the top 2 receivers. And listen, Odunze is still a great player, but he's not, in my opinion, up with Marv and Neighbors. So do you think Odunze would be the pick there at 6 in that scenario?
He maybe. I've also shifted in the last couple of weeks talking to people. I thought if it wasn't a quarterback, it was going to be a receiver and most likely Odunze. But to me, I know it seems like, hey, stop drafting offensive linemen high in the draft, right? Like
maybe they should.
It's like the Jets with defensive players.
But honestly, yeah, right. But honestly, like, if you were the Giants general manager at that pick, would you draft a receiver, or would you look at last season and study it and say, wow, we had like one reliable offensive lineman the whole season, and he didn't play half the year because he was hurt.
Yeah.
Like it might be overthinking it as much as you want the number 1 receiver, especially at a cost control if you can get it, right? But there's a part of me that just thinks it's overthinking it to believe that they wouldn't just take an offensive tackle there. Now that said, I've had some conversations that there's this conversation about what to do with Evan Neal, and moving him to guard's a possibility.
Yep.
But
Which opens up the possibility of drafting Alt.
true. But given the hiring of Brasillo, and what they like most about Brasillo is that with the Raiders, he took an offensive line that wasn't supposed to be good
Mhm.
and figured it out, developed guys, and made it good. And my understanding at this moment, after literally having a couple conversations an hour ago with some people who I trust close to the situation, is that the Giants, they want to give Evan one more run at right tackle.
Interesting.
It
So-
took Andrew Thomas a year too. It took him a year to get really going.
Right. And if they're doing that, which is what it looks like, at least their initial plan would be,
Mhm.
then that points back to Adunze in that spot. And it puts them in the market and free agency for a guard rather than a
Which
tackle.
there's a good chunk of them available.
Or maybe both.
Yeah.
Like maybe a swing tackle like Ella Manor, who played for Brasillo with the Raiders. And then maybe they go big in the guard market at like Jonah Jackson.
Right.
Something like that.
Yeah. I have a question for you. I just want to ask this straight up. On a confidence scale, 1 to 10. Well, let's do this. Let's do a Madden scale, 1 to 100. I like
Let's
the
do it.
Madden
Let's
scale.
do
It's more specific, you know. What is your confidence in Daniel Jones being, let's say, an above average starting quarterback for the next 3 years? Let's say 70 is your slightly confident. Where are you going in that? Sorry to put you on the hot
60
spot. 60. Okay.
or
I'm with
I
you
think
there.
that's fair.
That's fair.
yeah.
So you think this will be pretty short-lived, Daniel Jones's career from here on out with the Giants? I think it might be like a 1 or 2 year thing.
Yeah, and I
then-
think part of that is I think it's going to be hard for them to get good as a team quickly too.
yeah, that's the other side of it.
But
Yeah.
I think like his struggles on third down and in the red zone, like when the field shrinks, when the game speeds up, I think that's part of who he is. Like I don't think he's going to outgrow some of those.
Yeah.
Here comes the pressure, firing into coverage rather than waiting a half second longer and seeing the coverage open in the back of the end zone, like against the Seahawks when Witherspoon took that back. Like that play is the play that is going to, I think, stick in my mind and in a lot of Giants people's minds forever with him, is because it's just indicative of what he almost is, but is not, is taking them down there. They have a chance to win the game or take the lead or assert themselves, and he just can't get them over. But you can win games with Daniel. But as far as being above average and turning the team around and being the guy who takes them where they want to go, if I'm running the team, the neck injuries, along with the concerns about his play, the neck injuries are too scary for me.
Mhm.
Forget the ACL. Like he'll be back from that. It's the neck. I mean, and this is
You're right.
and this is something to watch too, is I mean, I saw him at the Super Bowl, like he's moving around fine. So I'm not saying like he's, permanently damaged up there or anything, but I'm just saying the concern for him to get re-injured, for it to end his career, knock on wood, hopefully it doesn't happen. But those types of injuries really scare you. And when he came back from the neck injury in that Raiders game that he tore his knee,
Yeah.
he was throwing the ball differently. Now, I don't know. I'm sure after everything heals and subsides there, when we watch him at training camp, like he'll be throwing normally again, because it won't be, whatever was affecting him, the nerves. But he was literally compensating in how he threw. Like it sounds funny, or it sounds crazy, but like I literally go to work every day and watch him throw. So like there's a lot of things I don't know. One thing I do know is how he throws a football. And I asked him about it. He said he was like, no, he obviously said like it wasn't the case, but you could see it. So all those things like are in my mind if I'm Joe Shane when I'm approaching his future.
I always say this too about the Giants. They always have the most interesting quarterback situations, because like Kerry Collins takes them to the Super Bowl. Then Eli is all over the place. Giant fans wanted him benched. They wanted Coughlin fired. He won the Super Bowl that year. It doesn't make any sense. Now it's like Daniel Jones. Like, where are we with that guy? It's like anything we think, maybe the opposite's true. Maybe Daniel Jones will be pretty good. I don't know yet. But
the crazy thing about Eli too, in the think of the fan base, is like, as you were just alluding to, like, so full disclosure, I grew up in Philadelphia.
Okay.
And, the Eagles owned in a large part through those years that I was growing up. When Eli was playing for the Giants, the Eagles would beat him all the time and he would throw interceptions and key moments.
Yes.
And for the Giants fans' perspective, once he, despite all those misses and messes and interceptions, once he won those 2 championships, now when a guy like Daniel Jones comes along and he's imperfect, they're like, well, yeah, but we've seen imperfect, and then we've seen him go on a run and win 2 Super Bowls. So it's almost,
exactly,
which is dangerous to think that way, but that is kind of how in New York people think. They overlook all the flaws, which obviously he gets credit for those 2 Super Bowl runs, but it doesn't mean the next guy's going to do it. You know what I mean?
Exactly. So let's talk free agency real quick. Saquon and Xavier McKinney. Which one of those players do you think is more likely to be brought back if it's just one of the 2?
McKinney.
You think Saquon's
and you just
time
had
is
him on your
done?
podcast too, right?
Yes. Talking ball with Pat Leonard podcast. Thank you. Just quick plug, the YouTube page at PL on NFL video podcast. Talking with players, guests. I do live Q&As with fans too on the Giants and on the NFL on Monday afternoons and Thursday nights. Appreciate you letting me do that. But
listen. He didn't listen though.
Yeah.
I told him, like, you better listen to
He's
that
like,
podcast.
sure, whatever.
Like, yeah.
How about McKinney?
Yeah.
So I think now Xavier wants to be paid, and I've heard a couple times. I know this is already out there, but I've heard a couple times that they really might try to put that transition tag on him.
Ooh.
I mean, you guys saw in the interview, he will, I don't think that'll go well.
Yeah.
Now, that wouldn't be them trying to. I think that's more of them playing the leverage game and negotiating publicly. Like I said, they're meeting today on Friday here at the Combine, and they know he's valuable, and I think they'll find a middle ground. They can't afford a tag on him. Yes, the cap's better, but if you franchise tag him for 17, 18 million this year, all of that rolls up this year.
Mm-hmm.
Multi-year deal allows you to spread the cap out, so this year's hit is low. Saquon's different because Saquon does want to be a Giant for life, but last year didn't sit well with him, especially because even once he came back, they didn't use him as much of a receiver as he feels like he should be. He thinks he could be a McCaffrey for a team if they used him that way and let him. And even though he has dropped some passes and struggled in pass protection, when they won that game in Washington, I know the defense forced 5 turnovers, but he caught those 2 touchdown passes. You get him out in space against a linebacker. He is that dynamic pass catcher in certain situations. I think he wants to win too. He wants to be a Hall of Famer. He wants to be somebody whose on-field legacy matches what he wants to do post-career. Right. He always talks about, and the Giants have talked about, we want you to be like Eli and Strahan and Tuck and Giant forever. You're going to be here. You're going to be in the New York media. You're going to be representing us. Those guys all won championships. And I think I don't want to speak for him. He never said this to me, but I think Saquon knows if he has to win, he's got to go somewhere else. And I think that's going to happen. I don't know where it's going to be, but I think it's going to happen.
Piggybacking off of that, do you think, and this goes through the minds of, I believe, many Giant fans, but do you think the Giants have lost their way just a little bit underneath this ownership group over the last 5-ish years?
Oh, very much. Yeah.
Yeah,
for sure.
You don't think this is just a downward trend that then eventually it's anything in life comes down, but will come back up? Do you think this is something to say about Mara and that ownership group?
Mara and Tish. And I think they recognized when they fired Judge and Gettleman.
Yes.
Even though Joe Judge was supposed to get 3 years, they fired him after 2. Third straight coach to lose his job after or during second season. But my feeling around this current regime and how ownership is handling it is they are trying, and they fully recognized, especially because it got pretty public how involved they were in the bad decisions that caused this team to spiral and stay in this rut. They're really trying, I think, to be patient with this regime. And also, it's Joe Shane's show. Now it's still John Mara's team and his show. He's the buck stops with him. So whatever you want to say about Joe Shane signing Daniel Jones, which he did, so John Mara did ultimately, right?
For sure.
But Joe still is accountable for that. But getting back to your question, like, for example, I think, Daboll's on the hot seat this year. If they stink again, like, I don't think he's going to be the coach for a fourth season. Might not even last the full season, depending on if it gets bad. But ownership recognizes their role in what they've become, and they are trying to be patient and let Shane execute the plan that he talked about coming in, because they very much, like, this is 100% fact. When they hired Joe Shane, they had the conversation about, like, this is not an overnight fix. We know that, Shane knows that, but they know that too. And don't expect this to be fixed, quote unquote, in 2 years. It's not going to be. We're going to try, and we're going to fix things along the way, but Shane says this all the time. We're going to build through the draft. Like, in other words, we'll have one draft class, we'll have two. We're still not going to be fixed, but we're going to have these building blocks, and we're going to supplement it with free agency. And after 3, 4, 5 seasons, hopefully we're sustainably good. Now, will he get that leash is the question, though, because like I said, they have said those exact words to people before. We know this isn't an overnight fix. You get at least 3 years, and then they get fired after 2. So
now
that's a long-winded answer, but
with that process, do you think making the playoffs when they did, they were not expected to be a very good team that year. They go on to make the playoffs. Do you think that accelerated their rebuild, and they kind of saw the team as like, maybe we are able to compete now? And then you go and pay Daniel Jones. Do you think that aggressiveness may have set them back instead of fully embracing the rebuild, the slow process of a rebuild?
Yes, you're absolutely right. It did. And Joe Shane actually admitted that right after the season. He was asked a question about Paris Campbell, because it was just a 1-year deal with a bunch of incentives. But in relation to, like, why did you sign so many receivers? Why were you going out and getting all these people?
Yeah.
And he said, in the middle of the answer, he said, you sign Daniel to a contract like that, you expedite the process a bit, I think is how he said it. But he said you expedite it, to try to give him a chance to win in the first 2 years, especially.
Yeah.
And yes, that did set them back. And really, that's been their struggle as an ownership group, going back to that, is when they get a sniff of a little earlier success, they think it's close to fixed or it's fixed. I mean, John Maris saying to, I think it was Ian O'Connor at the time in the locker room after beating Minnesota in the playoffs, we're back.
Oh, wow.
Like, and that
tells you all you need to know.
And
it's like what I said, trying to set up the step and repeat for the 15th time,
Exactly. And like, that in a nutshell, that is something they have struggled badly with. And yes, making that mistake again last year could end up being the demise of another regime. I just talked about the drafts with Joe Shane, and part of it is going to be, can they win enough games this year to sustain whatever the process is for bringing in a new quarterback, developing him, and all that. But also, like, his players that he's brought in need to be better than they've been. I mean, like Evan Neal, Thibodeau last year, the sacks were up, but everything else was. And these premier picks need to hit. It's so interesting how people talk now in a glowing light about Gettleman, in the sense that which is ridiculous.
That
but
is, yeah.
But they point out,
it is interesting.
But they point out, for example, like that at least when he had a high pick, like he got Andrew Thomas, Dexter Lawrence, whatever. But obviously there was DeAndre Baker and took Daniel 6. But I bring that up because for Shane, you have 4 picks in the top 70 this year, including the 6th overall, 2 high in the 2nd. You got to hit on these. Like,
definitely,
you have to hit on them if you're him.
All right. It's prediction time. So as you know, with uSTADIUM, we do hot takes.
Yeah.
And a take is basically your prediction with points attached to it that you could cash out when you get a certain amount of points. I'm going to make you a take pro bono with promo. Actually, with my points that I bought, I'm going to make him a take. I need a prediction, Giants record prediction.
Ooh.
Give it to me now, and we'll make this take happen, and we'll see if it hits.
I say that the Giants will win 6 games again.
Wow. Okay. 6 and 11.
Does that include a firing if 6 wins is the result?
Yes. I don't think Daboll's the coach the next season.
Wow. Okay.
So, like I said before,
Look who's crashing your interview right here.
Fowler.
He said he was gonna crash.
future talking ball guest here, everybody. Future talking ball.
You know, you
guest.
could take my mic. We're all better off, please.
But no, yeah, I think, like I said earlier, what I hope is that they get this to sustainably winning, and we're watching good football in New York, and I get to experience that firsthand. But my prediction, you're holding me to it, is 6-11 again, and a new coach the next season.
Wow. Do you think Shane stays if Daboll goes, or do they go together?
I think it's more likely he would stay in that scenario
To keep some of the foundation going,
even
especially if it's his pick that he's making.
right. Even though they came in as like a package deal, so to speak.
Like Douglas and Saleh, kind of. They're kind of tied at the hip right now.
Right. And that would be contingent, obviously, on like if this draft went incredibly bad and that was a major reason why, that would be different versus getting some good players, getting a new quarterback into the pipeline, and just the game day operation being poor, right?
Yeah.
Which would be more, you could point to the coach. So yeah, if you're holding me to it, Shane stays, Daboll goes 6-11.
You heard it right there.
Hot take. It's a pretty
That's
hot
it.
take.
I don't think I'm going to lend you my points for that. I'm not gonna do
I'll
that.
put my points.
I think it's
on
going to be over.
I'll
I think
put
the
my
Giants
points
will win
on
8
that.
games, but that's neither here nor there. All right, everyone. Pat Leonard,
You want to plug the podcast
New York
one
Daily
more time?
News beat reporter.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. YouTube, PL on NFL, Talking Ball with Pat Leonard podcast, wherever you get them, Apple, Spotify. And we're having Jeremy Fowler on this spring. I'm finally going to get him on. He's a man in demand, as you'll find out soon. He's a man in
He's
demand.
expensive, man, this guy.
I know. Thanks for having me on, though, guys. This is a lot of fun.
Yeah, no problem. I really appreciate it. Thanks, Pat.
No, you got it.
Hey, hopefully see you later, man.
6 wins and a firing. That's
Drink
what we
on
got
me.
out of that.
Don't make it go viral. Come on.